Today we're taking a step back to the 19th century to explore 15 odd inventions from the Victorian era. Let's start with number 15, the pyrophone. The pyrophone, also known as the fire organ or fire explosion organ, was a musical instrument that produced sound through the combustion of gas within the pipes. Invented in the 19th century by physicist George Kastner, it was heralded as a completely new type of instrument, standing apart from the traditional wind, string, and percussion ones. Kastner, who was both a scientist and a musician, designed the pyrophone by harnessing the principles of thermoacoustics. This instrument works by igniting gas, typically hydrogen or coal gas, inside glass or metal tubes. This combustion creates a series of small explosions, generating pressure waves that cause the air within the tubes to vibrate. These vibrations are what produce those musical tones. The exact setup of each one that was built was varied, but a common design involved a keyboard connection to a series of pipes. When a key is pressed, it opens a valve that releases gas in the tube, which is then ignited. The ignition is controlled to ensure a continuous and controlled burn, producing sustained notes and the visual spectacle of flames dancing within the tubes, making it arguably the most exciting instrument ever created. It never really gained widespread popularity though, mainly because of the inherent dangers of operating with combustible materials, but its sound too was described as being eerie and otherworldly, so it wasn't exactly in line with the musical tastes of the time. Number 14, glass fire grenade. Fire has long been a major problem, particularly in built-up areas, and while modern technology means that most infernos can now be dealt with quickly, that wasn't always the case. There have been countless different inventions to try to help extinguish flames, but one of the more unusual ones was the glass fire grenade. They actually became quite commonplace in the late 19th and early 20th centuries and were designed to provide a quick and efficient means of extinguishing fires before they could spread. The grenade would be thrown at the base of a fire, and upon impact the glass would shatter, releasing the liquid to douse the flames. The use of carbon tetrachloride was particularly common due to its effectiveness in extinguishing flames, but it was later discovered to be highly toxic, posing significant health risks. The design of the grenades was both functional and ornamental. Many were beautifully crafted, with intricate designs and vibrant colors, so they were often placed in visible and accessible locations within buildings, ensuring that they could be quickly retrieved. Despite their initial popularity though, glass fire grenades had several drawbacks that eventually led to their decline. The main problem was of course the toxicity of the fire-suppressing chemicals, but the glass containers were problematic too, as they would often shatter by accident. By the mid-20th century, advancements in other methods led to the phasing out of glass fire grenades, and they were ultimately completely replaced by modern fire extinguishers, which are way more effective and much safer to use. Number 13, the Lunette Parasol. The Lunette Parasol was an accessory from the Victorian era that's a great example of the blend of fashion and functionality that was so often sought after. Its name, lunette, refers to the crescent-shaped design of the parasol, which was particularly popular during the 19th century. Parasol use was widespread at the time, mostly amongst women, to protect their skin from the sun, and pale skin was seen as a mark of beauty and social standing, as it indicated that you didn't work outside. And the lunette parasol, with its unusual crescent shape, became a fashionable item, offering sun protection while making a bold style statement. Meaning you didn't need to move the shade out of your way to see where you were going, and you could keep it much closer to your head while you were walking around. It's a bizarre thing from today's perspective, but with so many people using parasols on warmer days, this new design became quite popular. Despite their initial popularity though in the 19th century, the lunette parasol gradually fell out of favor as fashion trends evolved. The more advent of more practical and less elaborate sun protection methods, along with changing beauty standards, meant that they were all but forgotten about. Number 12, the air-conditioned top hat. During the late 19th and early 20th century, top hats were an expected type of formal attire for men, symbolizing elegance and sophistication. If you've ever worn one though, you'll know that they can become quite uncomfortable in warmer weather, and this led to inventions to come up with a solution, an air-conditioned version. The concept behind the air-conditioned top hat was simple. It involved fitting a small battery-operated fan or series of vents into the structure of the hat. The fan would circulate air within the hat, helping to cool the wearer's head, and in some designs, a series of tiny vents or perforations allowed air to flow through the hat, providing a passive cooling effect. One of the most famous designs was patented by an inventor named Philip Stevens in 1893. His design featured a miniature fan powered by a small battery concealed within the lining of the hat that would draw in air through a series of discrete vents. Now, while this invention gained attention for its ingenuity, it wasn't really widely adopted, mainly due to the limitations of battery technology at the time and the added weight and complexity it introduced to the hat. It does remain, though, a great example of how innovative people were at the time, looking for solutions to even the mildest of problems. Number 11. The Garat Proof Cravat. During the 19th century, as cities grew and industrialization took hold, crime rates also increased. One particularly feared means of attack was the garrote, a technique where a thief would use a cord, wire, or similar device to wrap around a victim from behind to incapacitate them for long enough to steal their valuables. In response to this threat, inventors and tailors came up with the idea of a garrote-proof cravat. Neckties like them were very popular during the 18th and 19th centuries, so to transform it into a protective device, the cravat was reinforced with materials that could withstand the pressure of a wire. Essentially, it became the Victorian equivalent of a bulletproof vest. The cravat typically involved integrating thin metal plates, wire mesh, or layers of strong, durable fabric into its design. Some designs featured a flexible yet sturdy metal lining that could distribute the force, allowing the cravat to maintain its appearance and stylish accessory while providing protection. The design was particularly popular among those who traveled frequently, businessmen and other individuals who might be at risk of attack in unfamiliar or dangerous areas, and also served as a subtle yet effective form of personal defense. It never became a widespread fashion item, though, and its use was largely limited to those who could afford such specialized accessories. As urban areas became safer and other forms of personal protection became more prevalent, the need for protective clothing like this was gone, so it was, in the end, no more than a short-lived fad. Number 10. The Spherical Velocipede. The Victorian era saw thousands of different designs for vehicles that all, in their own way, had the potential to become the next big thing. But one of the strangest of all was the Spherical Velocipede. Unlike the conventional bicycles and tricycles of its time, which relied on cylindrical wheels for movement, the Spherical Velocipede envisioned a unique mode of motion by using a large central spherical wheel. This design typically involved a large hollow sphere made of a durable material such as metal or reinforced rubber, which would serve as the main wheel. The rider would sit on a frame that was either mounted directly on the sphere or suspended above it and would include a seat, handlebars for steering, and pedals connected to an internal mechanism that allowed them to propel the sphere forward by pedaling. There were a number of benefits that came from a design like this, with the biggest one being maneuverability like nothing else. The spherical wheel could theoretically move in any direction, allowing the rider to change course quickly and easily. Now, this would have been a significant advantage in navigating the crowded and uneven streets of 19th century cities. And it would have been a much more stable and a lower risk of tipping over, which was a common hazard with the high-wheeled bicycles of the time, the penny farthing. Of course, it had a number of challenges, too, that prevented it from becoming a widely used mode of transportation. The complexity of the internal mechanisms proved pretty difficult to perfect with the materials and engineering knowledge, and balancing on a single large sphere also posed significant difficulties, making the vehicle hard to control for most riders. It remains, then, as a quirky historical design that never quite made it, but one that engineers and hobbyists still occasionally revisit for the joy of creating something refreshingly fun and unique. Number 9. Parenti's Smoking Machine. Smoking is, of course, now known to be devastatingly bad for your health, but this hadn't been proven by the Victorian era, and it was incredibly popular across society. With increasing concerns about the effects this would have, a smoking machine was created to simulate the habit in a controlled environment so it could be studied. Its invention is credited to someone called Parenti, although specific details about the inventor and the exact time are not known. The device itself was a complex apparatus intended to mimic the act of smoking a cigarette or a cigar, with the main function being to draw smoke through a filter or chamber, allowing for the analysis of the smoke and its constituents. This capability was crucial for early research into the health effects of smoking, providing valuable data that would later contribute to our understanding of tobacco-related disease. Now, the machine was made up of several key components. At its core, the mechanism that simulated the human act of inhaling and exhaling smoke. This mechanism was often a bellow or a pump that created a consistent airflow through the tobacco product. The smoke would then pass through a series of tubes and chambers, some of which contained filters or absorbent materials designed to capture tar, nicotine, and other particulates. And those captured substances could then be analyzed chemically and physically to determine their composition and potential health impact. By providing a reliable method to produce and analyze smoke in lab settings, researchers could conduct experiments that were previously impossible. This research helped identify many of the harmful components of tobacco smoke and their effects on us. It laid the groundwork for public health campaigns and regulatory measures that would emerge in the 20th century. It was a strange invention, but one that would pave the way for further research and eventually lead to the realization of how dangerous smoking is. Number 8. The crank machine. There's always been debate surrounding the treatment of prisoners, whether the focus should be on punishment, rehabilitation, or a combination of the two. In modern times, there's at least a stronger idea that people being held in jail should be afforded basic human rights and treated with a level of decency. But this wasn't necessarily the case in Victorian times. Prisoners were seen as outcasts and few people cared about the conditions they were kept in, and this allowed for the creation of various devices that wouldn't have any place in a modern penal system. The crank machine was one of these. It was a means of punishment that was at a time commonplace in Victorian prisons. Introduced in the mid-19th century, the crank machine was a simple but grueling apparatus. It was made up of a large handle attached to a mechanism that required the user to turn it repeatedly, simulating the action of operating a capstan or ship's winch. The resistance could be adjusted by the wardens through a series of gears, making the task more strenuous if needed, and each turn of the handle counted on a dial, and inmates were often required to complete thousands of revolutions each day as part of their punishment. The devices were brought in at a time when there was a shift from corporal punishment to systems that emphasized hard labor as a means of instilling discipline. Influential figures like Sir Edmund Duquesne, who played a significant role in British prison reform, argued in favor of the use of such devices, as it was believed that monotonous and physically demanding work would deter crime, reform character, and instill a sense of industriousness in prisoners. The use of the crank machine was not without controversy, though. Critics argued it was a form of cruel and unusual punishment, doing little to rehabilitate prisoners or prepare them for reintegration. The physical toll it took on inmates, combined with the psychological stress of performing such a boring task, raised serious ethical concerns. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the use of the crank machine began to decline as policies evolved, and they were all gone from prisons by 1910. Moving on to number 7, the MultiPurpose Cane. There have been a number of successful inventions that have combined several useful tools into one object, such as an army knife, but not every attempt at doing this has become popular. One of the weirdest ones from the Victorian era was a multi-purpose cane, which, as the name suggests, gave it far more functionality than simply being a walking aid. At its core, the multi-purpose cane was just a walking stick, which was a common accessory for gentlemen and ladies of the time, not just for their practicality, but as a fashion statement. The multi-purpose cane took this concept a step further by integrating additional tools and features, transforming it into a compact, portable toolkit. One of the most common things included in a cane like this was the hidden compartment. These compartments could be used to store a variety of small items such as maps, documents, or flasks, and some canes were equipped with a removable handle that doubled as a container for these items, providing both discretion and convenience. This made the cane an ideal companion for travelers, explorers, or anyone who wanted to keep essential items close at hand. Another popular feature was a weapon, typically a concealed blade or a firearm, known as sword canes or gun canes. These devices provided a means of self-defense in an era when personal safety was significant. The blade would be cleverly hidden within the shaft of the cane and could be quickly deployed in an emergency. And similarly, gun canes housed a small single-shot pistol, offering a discreet but effective way to deter an attacker. Other designs offered built-in telescopes or compasses or even magnifying glasses, fishing gear, or musical instruments like flutes. The possibilities were limited only by the imagination of the designers, but with changes in societal trends and the development of alternatives, the multi-purpose cane gradually fell out of favor. Number 6. The Rotary Hairbrush. Hairbrushes for thousands of years have been a staple of personal grooming, allowing you to untangle and brush your hair into the way that you like it. But during the Victorian era, the trend of combining technology with simple objects led to the design of something wildly overcomplicated. It's known as the rotary hairbrush. The idea was to enhance the traditional hairbrushing experience by adding a mechanical element that could provide a more thorough and consistent brushing. This was particularly appealing during a time when personal appearance was becoming more important and elaborate hairstyles required meticulous care. Now, typically a rotary hairbrush featured a cylindrical brush head that could rotate either manually or with the assistance of a small motor. In manual versions, the brush was equipped with a handle that, when turned, caused the bristles to rotate around the cylinder. And it was this rotation that allowed the brush to cover more surface area of the hair with each stroke. The motorized versions, which emerged later, used a small electric motor to power the rotation, making the process even easier and more efficient. There were benefits to styling too, with the rotating bristles helping to create volume and smoothness, making it easier to achieve the desired look. Some models even included attachments such as combs or curling tongs to make them even more useful. There were challenges in gaining widespread adoption though, particularly as the early manual versions required a certain amount of dexterity and effort to operate. The motorized versions, while more convenient, were often more expensive and less accessible to the average person, and eventually the creation of more advanced electric hairstyling tools such as blow dryers and curling irons put an end to the idea for good. Number 5. The Artificial Leech. Medicine has advanced significantly over the past century, and many of the techniques and beliefs from the Victorian times are now seen as wildly outdated and in many cases dangerous. One of these was the idea of bloodletting, something that had been a treatment method for a long time. The preferred method of doing this was by attaching leeches to a patient, but this brought a series of challenges, so inventors started looking for a solution. Leech therapy dates back to ancient civilizations such as Egypt, Greece, and India. By the 19th century, the use of leeches was pretty widespread in Europe and America. The practice has significant drawbacks, including the difficulty in controlling the amount of blood removed and the risk of infection from live leeches. The artificial leech was conceived as a mechanical alternative, offering a more precise and sterile method of treatment. One of the earliest inventions was developed by a French physician and inventor, Dr. Joseph-Pierre Hérold. His device, patented in the 1840s, consisted of a small handheld instrument that used a combination of suction and lancets. The design included a spring-loaded mechanism that controlled a set of sharp blades, which would make tiny incisions in the skin. After the incisions were made, a suction cup was applied to draw blood into a chamber within the device. Now, the artificial leech offered several advantages over live ones. First, it allowed physicians to precisely control the quantity of blood removed. Second, it eliminated the possibility of infections and other complications, so the device could be sterile and reused, making it more hygienic. The device did, though, require much more skill to operate effectively in comparison to using leeches, and some physicians and patients are initially skeptical about how effective it could be. It did become a commonly used device for a while, but thankfully, with improved medical knowledge, their use came to an end too. Number 4. The Electric Corset. Clothing designed throughout history, particularly for women, hasn't exactly focused on comfort, and a Victorian design called the Electric Corset looked to combine the latest fashions with the latest trends in medicine to create something that you'd hardly think sounds relaxing. Corsets were a staple of women's fashion throughout the Victorian era, designed to cinch the waist and provide a desired hourglass figure. The electric corset went a step further and was marketed as a health-enhancing device that could alleviate various ailments through the application of mild electrical stimulation. Now, the concept behind the electric corset came from the field of electrotherapy, which was gaining popularity. Electricity was seen as a mysterious and powerful force with potential health benefits, including pain relief, improved circulation, and increased energy. The electric corset featured embedded electrodes or conductive wires connected to a small battery. When activated, these components would deliver a gentle electrical current to the wearer's body. Now, the currents were intended to stimulate muscles, promote blood flow, and provide a form of therapeutic massage, with manufacturers claiming they could treat a range of conditions from rheumatism and neuralgia to poor posture and general fatigue. Unsurprisingly, there were drawbacks with all this. They were cumbersome and uncomfortable, and the embedded electrical stuff added weight and stiffness, with the batteries requiring frequent recharging or replacing. With changing fashions, especially as corsets fell out of popularity, electric corsets soon went the same way as well, and by the 1920s, production sales came to an end. Number 3. The Pneumatic Railway. The 19th century saw the face of transport change forever, with steam trains and early automobiles significantly reducing travel times and bringing the world much closer together. This inspired inventors to create new vehicles, hoping to be the next big thing, and one that got surprisingly close was the pneumatic railway. At the time, traditional steam locomotives had already transformed transportation, but they had their limitations, such as noise, pollution, and the need for continuous fuel. The basic principle involved using compressed air to move a train along the tracks. This was achieved through a system of pneumatic tubes and air pumps. Now, the most famous implementation of this technology was the atmospheric railway, where a continuous pipe laid between the rails housed a piston connected to the train. Air pumps at stations would create a vacuum in the pipe, pulling the piston and the attached train forward. Now, the train was connected to that piston inside the pipe, and stationary engines at the stations pumped air to create the vacuum. The leather flap valves were prone to wear and tear, leading to leaks and loss of vacuum pressure, and weather conditions such as rain or frost further exacerbated those issues. Still, it showed potential and led to the most ambitious pneumatic railway project in London. The London Pneumatic Dispatch Company, founded in the 1860s, aimed to transport mail and small parcels through underground pneumatic tubes. While it successfully demonstrated the feasibility of this concept, practical and economic challenges prevented it from being expanded. But of course, the idea wasn't a complete dead end, as pneumatic tubes for short-distance mail delivery became commonplace. Number 2. The Eureka Machine. The Eureka Machine, also known as the Latin verse machine, was a remarkable invention from the 19th century that can be seen as one of the earliest forms of computers designed to automate creative and intellectual tasks. This device was engineered to compose Latin poetry, skillfully merging linguistic intricacies with mechanical precision. During a period of significant advancement in computational linguistics and mechanical arts, the machine was developed to automate the complex task of Latin poetry composition, which demanded not only fluency in the language, but also a deep understanding of its meter, rhythm, and poetic forms. The Latin verse machine operated through a series of rotating discs, levers, and type elements, allowing users to set parameters such as meter and poem length. The machine would then mechanically arrange words and phrases to generate coherent Latin verses. Now, one notable version was created by Carl Augustus Steinheil, a German engineer renowned for his work in telegraphy and optics. Steinheil's machine used interchangeable plates and gears representing different parts of speech and syntactic structure, enabling it to produce various poetic compositions. Initially viewed as a novelty, the machine found practical use in education, serving as a tool to teach and demonstrate the complexities of Latin poetry. It showed students the structural aspects of poetry and Latin rules. Now, beyond its educational value, the Latin verse machine was a precursor to later advancements in computational linguistics and artificial intelligence, highlighting potential to automate language processing tasks. Now, despite the ingenuity, the machine had its limitations. It was relatively basic by Victorian standards, producing formulaic, repetitive verse lacking the creativity of human poets. But moreover, its mechanical nature made it prone to malfunctions. As technology evolved, though, digital computers and natural language processing began to offer more sophisticated means to achieve similar results. Additionally, as Latin became less central in education and communication, the relevance of such machines dwindled, leading to their eventual obsolescence. Number 1. The cat organ. Countless instruments have been created throughout history, many of which have gone on to be widely used. But of those that have failed, the strangest and most controversial of all was the cat organ. Also known as the Katzenclavier, it's believed several were actually built in the 18th century and were said to have combined elements of animal behavior and musical performance. According to historical accounts, the cat organ was designed to produce music using the meows of live cats. The basic idea involved arranging a series of cats in a line, each secured in a cage or a box with their tails extending outwards. Above the cats was a keyboard mechanism similar to that of traditional organs, so when a key's pressed, a device would poke the tail of the corresponding cat, causing it to meow. Well, the cats were supposedly selected ahead of time for their pitch of their meows and were arranged in a way that created a scale that could be played like a musical instrument. The original idea of the cat organ is believed to have been put forward by a German scholar who described it in his works on music and acoustics. Now, his name was Kircher and was a polymath with a keen interest in the interplay between sound and science. It's unlikely he made one himself, though, or even thought it would be ethical to attempt, but as so often happens, there were some who tried to build one for themselves, although it's clearly not something that was common. The cat organ did, however, capture the imagination of people at the time, not only because of its bizarre nature, but also because of the statement it made about the excesses and eccentricities of scientific and musical experimentation. In a time when animal welfare wasn't a significant concern, the use of live animals in such a way might have been viewed as acceptable, if troublesome. Well, despite its notoriety, the cat organ faced significant ethical challenges. The cruelty of the device, which relied on the distress of the animal to produce the sound, would have been likely the main obstacle to its widespread acceptance. Over time, the cat organ has become a symbol of the darker side of human ingenuity, where the pursuit of novelty and spectacle can lead to morally questionable ideas. It is a powerful reminder of the ethical considerations that must come alongside technological and artistic innovation, something we could do well to remember in modern times, with all the potential that the latest technology gives us. Don't make a cat organ, guys. I'll see you next time. Thank you to our channel members.